Welcome to the Indiana's Flood Control Act, presented by the Indiana Department of Natural Resources, Division of Water. Indiana's Flood Control Act, IC 14-28-1, regulates various development activities within the floodway of a state waterway by requiring DNR approval prior to the beginning of the project. Due to extensive flooding, most notably in 1913 and again in 1937 along the Ohio River, Indiana legislature enacted the Flood Control Act in 1945, and the Indiana Flood Control and Water Resources Commission was established and began issuing permits in the early 1950s. The floodplain management rules are stated in 312 Indiana Administrative Code, Chapter 10, were promulgated for the Flood Control Act and the Floodplain Management Act. This part of the Indiana Administrative Code contains jurisdictional information, establishes project performance standards, contains key definitions and design criteria for specific regulatory exemptions and general licenses. Here we see a diagram of the floodplain that shows both the floodway and the entire 1% annual chance floodplain. The Flood Control Act is limited to streams with an upstream drainage area greater than 1 square mile. Some FEMA maps cut off the mapping the special flood hazard area at the 1 square mile drainage area location. This eases the burden administratively. However, common sense should be used, as obviously some flood risk does exist. Where a flood hazard is mapped beyond the 1 square mile drainage area limit, the burden is on the applicant to have the base flood elevation, or BFE, developed, and on the floodplain administrator to determine whether the BFE is acceptable. The basic criteria for approval that is used by DNR when permitting projects are: 1, it will not adversely affect the efficiency or unduly restrict the capacity of the floodway. 2, it will not constitute an unreasonable hazard to the safety of life or property. And 3, it will not result in unreasonable detrimental effects upon fish, wildlife, and other botanical resources. In review of projects, the department must assess not only a project's individual effect, but the cumulative effect of previously permitted projects combined with the proposed project. So what about residential structures in a floodway? First, let's look at new homes on a new site. This is generally prohibited, but is allowed in the Boundary River floodway, which is the Ohio River between Indiana and Kentucky. Even though it is allowed in this area, those homes must meet specific criteria listed here. For existing homes, non-substantial improvements, additions, and repairs are allowed without regard to building protection standards. These typically do not require a DNR permit, but do require a local permit. They may require a permit or approval if any excavation, fill, or other grading is done outside the existing footprint of the structure. Keep in mind that the local ordinance or regulations may be more restrictive. Substantial improvements are not allowed in non-boundary river floodways, but reconstruction is and requires DNR approval prior to the beginning of the construction activities. Continuing to look at existing homes, Substantial improvements or additions to residents in the Ohio River or Boundary River floodway are allowed but must meet the criteria listed here and first obtain a DNR permit. For reconstructions in a non-boundary river floodway, there is a general license option provided to meet this specific criteria. There is no permit fee for the general license process. For structures that do not meet the general license criteria, there's a permit fee of $50 in non-boundary river floodways and $10 in the Ohio River floodway. Conversions on non-residential structures to residential structures are not allowed. This includes the conversion to any type of abode or residence, single family, overnight fishing cabins, and other listed here. However, residential structures may be converted to non-residential uses. For this type of conversion, permits will depend on the work proposed. So what if the community has more restrictive regulations? The more restrictive regulations shall apply, and this is supported by 44 CFR 60.1C, IC 14-28-3, and noted on any DNR responses and permits. Currently, there are 33 Indiana communities in the Community Rating Systems or CRS program that will likely have these more restrictive standards in their local ordinance, local regulations. Do not forget that DNR approval does not replace a local permit. A local permit is still required for all development in the special flood hazard area. Lastly, DNR approval does not override more restrictive local or federal regulations. An example of this is the development in the floodway that causes any rise in the base flood elevation, but less than 0.15 feet and is permitted by the division. It is required that the applicant receives a conditional letter of map revision or CLOMAR approval from FEMA prior to the community issuing a permit. The floodplain administrator will also need to receive the LOMAR prior to issuing a certificate of occupancy or a completion certificate for that stated development. What if you discover unpermitted activity in a floodway? You should issue a stop work order if the work is underway, provide a written notice of violation of your local floodplain management ordinance, inform the property owner that permits are required, both DNR and local, seek restoration of the site or proper permits, and contact the Division of Water Compliance Section. DNR also has jurisdiction on public freshwater lakes under the Lake Preservation Act. Our authority is confined to the area at or lakeward of the shoreline of the lake and within 10 feet of the shoreline. If an impermeable structure or wall is proposed below the legal lake level, the green check marks in this image here to the right indicate projects that do not require prior approval from DNR. The red X's are projects that would require DNR approval or permit. Listed here are other regulatory programs where DNR has jurisdictional authority. We only covered the Flood Control Act and then briefly touched on Lake Preservation Act. Other information available on the Division of Water's websites are the statutes, rules, non-rule policy documents, and much more. Thank you for watching Indiana's Flood Control Act.